Good afternoon. Today's video is a little bit different. Normally my videos follow a tried and true format. I read a book, I finish the book, I review the book, and by the act of reviewing, it helps me remember the book that I've just read because my memory isn't that great. And the conversations that happen in the comment section below also help me remember the book. This one is different. I'm going to concentrate on the author T.J. Bass, who wrote 2 novels in his lifetime and 7 or 9 stories depending on your source. Now the reason for that is I just recently finished reading Half Past Human as a buddy read with Ira over in SF Words of Wonder. And thank you Ira for hosting and for doing the editing for that video. I'll post a link to that below. It was a great discussion. It was a very full book and well worth reviewing and debating. We ended up reading this one because just last year I read The God Whale, which is number 2 in the Hive series. So that's the 2 novels that T.J. Bass wrote in his lifetime. For those of us in our particular little niche on BookTube who enjoy classic and maybe even golden age science fiction and fantasy, there's perhaps a slightly different reading motif than people who only read modern science fiction and fantasy. For a start, there's that pleasure of going out in the wild and finding a random book on the shelf that you've never heard of before, by an author you've never heard of before, which was how I ended up with The God Whale a couple of years back. There's also the joy of the cover art, because a lot of the books were paperbacks for classic science fiction, and a lot of the artwork is magnificent. And the artwork will often be a factor for many of us in buying our books. So the artwork on T.J. Bass, who I haven't been able to accurately identify the artists yet, is a wraparound. It's absolutely gorgeous. And when you include that with the fact that it's about a whale AI, I couldn't resist. But I hadn't heard of T.J. Bass, and after I got it home I realised almost no one else has either. I think it had 3 or 4 likes on Goodreads. I don't think it had any reviews at all. On BookTube I found one other person who'd actually read a T.J. Bass and reviewed it. If you go to Wikipedia, a wonderful source of information to which I subscribe, you have got 1 paragraph about him. So T.J. Bass was the pseudonym for Thomas J. Bassler. He was an American physician primarily, but he wrote a little bit of science fiction on the side. He was born in 1932 and he died in 2011. Now, he had some controversial and interesting notions about diet and smoking, which I won't go into, and I'm not entirely sure that the Goodreads post is accurate. And as a consequence, I'm not sure that my review for The God Whale is 100% accurate either. His bibliography includes 2 science fiction novels, these ones, and some non-fiction stuff that I'm not interested in. And in Goodreads we have got 7 short stories. But if you move further into the interwebs, you will eventually find other sources such as the ISFDB, which lists more short stories. So there I think we've got 9. Anyway, around about 7, because some of those short stories ended up being fix-ups for his 2 novels. Now, T.J. Bass as a physician, his physicianhood, I suppose, really comes through in his writing style for both these books. They are intensely, densely world building. The world building is intensely packed, I suppose you would say. Yes. Half Past Human, the first one, is possibly a mashup from 2 short stories. One of them is actually Half Past Human, and there's another one from his Hive series. This one was published in 1971 originally. I haven't been able to find any of the originals, so I bought this Masterworks. Well, I got given this Masterworks, which I'm very, very proud of, and has got a really excellent introduction by Ken MacLeod, of whom I haven't heard, but who is apparently a Buddhist. I have no idea how a Buddhist is writing an introduction for a science fiction author. If you know, do please let me know. I'm intrigued. Now, T.J. Bass' stories are in the Hive. So the Hive is in a very, very far future, totally and utterly post-apocalyptic scenario where basically the whole world has become a monoculture to support humanity. Humanity, I think, are at a count of 3 trillion. They live entirely underground and they are controlled by the Hive, or a AI, I'm gonna suspect, though T.J. Bass never uses the expression of Big Earth Society who runs them. It's basically breeding and genetically manipulating humans to be less. They don't have pigmentation, they've got fragile bones. 27 is old, really old. And they control the population by nutrients. You've got a basic food group, but later we learn that it's got no flavor and not all the nutrients that they need. The society is this mixture of caring in places but incredibly brutal in others. And T.J. Bass uses a lot of pathology descriptions, most of which are accurate, some of which are a bit dated, in order to create his incredibly strong world. So there was one in particular that I liked, and I think I quote this one in the video with Ira as well. It is from page 20. Fibrin and erythrocyte crust covered the endemitous laceration, and I have never heard a more complicated way of saying the wound scabbed over. I just love that. But throughout, you've got a lot of pathology. T.J. Bass, well, I don't know much about him. It sounds like maybe he was one of those scientists who was so fascinated by the science he's studying that he goes around trying to talk in code almost. If you go to ISFDB, you will find a photograph of the man and some interesting information about his fiction stories. So he apparently had 5 that are part of the Hive series, and then you've got 4 that aren't. However, at least one of those, Star Itch, was published as Thomas J. Bassler, so as his full name. Most of those short stories were published in If magazine, and those are mostly, as far as I can tell, available to you. If you go to archive.org, you will find A Game of Biochess, Song of Kaya, which did get incorporated into one of the novels, and Star Itch, which I don't believe did get incorporated into any of the novels. So, T.J. Bass, he seems to have carved himself really fast and really well this niche in science fiction. So he had all these stories published, and many of them were translated into French and German. And then he combined, a couple of years later, he combined them to create the novels. And then he just sort of vanished. And I don't know what happened to him next. He was alive till 2011. These were published in the 70s. I don't think he published anything past 1974 when The God Whale came out. It's as if he just gave up on science fiction, which I suppose is fair if that's what you want to do. But it is a bit of a shame because his storytelling method is fascinating. I urge you to go and listen to me and Ira talking about it. And he was both of these were nominated for Nebula. Neither of them won, but one of them was up against Ursula Le Guin, so I think that one didn't have as much chance. Now, among the short fiction, you've got 4 stories that weren't incorporated, except in some notions, into the 2 main novels, and they are much more science fiction rather than on an Earth futuristic dystopia type like these 2. One of the real joys in reading classic speculative fiction is these authors. These beautiful covers, artwork that just mystify and awe you. These phenomenal authors that wrote 7, 9 stories, 2 novels, and then vanished into obscurity, leaving behind this tiny legacy that most people will never see and never read. and yet which have so much content in them that they put to shame many other books that are much more famous. Some of them justly so, but not many of the more famous ones of the era have a more fascinating world-building methodology than T.J. Bass did. He wasn't that great in characters. His characters were vehicles for his story, but his world-building was spectacular. His ability to incorporate pathological and just general science knowledge into his everyday speech is not convincing always, but it's always fascinating for the reader. The reader is better off having Google available to them while they are reading, I must say. I do have some biological science in my background, but part of this book was being read during Cyclone Alfred, and I couldn't Google meanings, and I didn't always understand them. So if you think that's going to bother you, it's not for you. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you're out and about and you see T.J. Bass, and anything that I've said sounds intriguing, I suggest grab him, and if nothing else, you will find an author that is quite unlike any other classic science fiction author that I've read in most ways. Furthermore, if you can, go and watch Ira's beautifully edited video where we both discuss T.J. Bass and Half Past Human. Thank you very much for watching, and read good books.